I'm Nick Flights, agronomist for Pentair Hypro. Now, if we look back at recent trends in the spraying industry, say the past 5 or 6 years, spraying world, the major focus there has been on drift reduction. It's been achieved ultimate drift reduction through the use of nozzles that produce ultra-coarse droplets, drift reduction adjuvants that further increase the droplet size. But we're seeing some shifts now occur in the spraying world to other trait packages, or even people applying more fungicides in their herbicide application. And this is an area where tank mix nozzle selection is going to be key. And so in this video, I'm going to use a general example of the Enlist trait package, where we now have the ability, the tolerance, and the approval to apply a 2,4-D choline, called Enlist 1, with glufosinate, or Liberty, a contact herbicide. Now generally the nozzles that would do those two things, high drift reduction, high coverage, high droplet density, don't exist in the same package. They would generally be two different nozzles. But I do think there's some nozzles out there that can do the job very well, kind of give us the best of both worlds. And so there's some data that we're going to look at to start here. And this is some field testing data that was generated by the University of Kentucky Weed Science Department. And they were comparing downwind drift reduction and a couple different coverage metrics. And they were comparing them against an XR flat fan nozzle that's there at the top. That's kind of our check treatment. Flat fan nozzles give little to no drift reduction. So that flat fan nozzle is not approved for dicamba. It's not approved to apply Enlist 1 or Enlist Duo, but it's there to compare the other two nozzles with. So then you have the ULD from Pentair Hypro and then the TJet TTI. So the first thing they did is they collected the distance downwind of the sprayer that they were able to pick up physical spray droplet movement. So you see the XR flat fan drifted 29 meters, roughly 100 feet downwind of the sprayer. Compare that with the ULD and the TTI, we saw a big fall off in physical droplet movement downwind. So those nozzles being drift reduction nozzles, they're doing their job. If we move over to the right and we start looking at the coverage metrics, we're going to start with droplet density. That's the number of droplets per square centimeter. You see there at the top, the highest droplet density is that XR flat fan. Not surprising. The smaller a droplet size is produced by a nozzle, we're going to have more droplets created per volume of liquid. So flat fan nozzles, they tend to drift a lot, but they give us a high droplet density. If we move down that column there, you see the ULD in the middle from Pentair Hypro, and then the TJet TTI there at the bottom. So if we start at the bottom and work up, you kind of have a good, better, best scenario in droplet density. Now the most interesting and surprising part of this data that really shocked everyone is there on the far right, looking at percent coverage. That's percent leaf area coverage. And you're going to see that the XR flat fan and the ULD provided the same percent leaf area coverage in this testing. So what this data is showing is the versatility of the ULD nozzles. On one hand, we're seeing that very effective downwind drift reduction. It's achieving the regulatory approvals. It's on the label for products like Enlist. At the same time, we're seeing higher levels of coverage, and we're seeing percent area coverage that is matching that of a flat fan nozzle. We can potentially apply a lot of different products with a nozzle like this that's going to be very versatile. So we've done some generic testing. I want to look at actual data for my scenario I've posed applying Enlist 1 plus Liberty. The table here we're looking at, we did some joint testing with Winfield United and BASF to test this out. And so we had 4 different treatments, and you see those across the bottom. Starting on the left, the first is Liberty, applied alone in water. Then you have a Liberty plus Class Act NG, a water conditioning adjuvant. Then you see Liberty Enlist 1 plus Class Act NG, and then Liberty Enlist 1 Class Act NG and interlock. And I really want to draw your attention to the 2 treatments on the far right, where we have Liberty and Enlist 1 included in the tank together. If we think back to the previous data, we're talking about effective downwind drift reduction. You see here across both pressures tested, we were sub 2% driftable fine droplets. At 30 psi, we were sub 1% driftable fine droplets. So that's phenomenal drift reduction. We're seeing a significant drop in drift potential. We're looking at 95% drift reduction in this scenario. Now you might say, we're getting really, really high drift reduction. What's it going to do to my coverage? So then when we looked and we tested the percent area covered, if we look at those same 2 treatments on the far right, we see we have as good or better coverage than the other 2 treatments. So we're still seeing that best of both worlds. We're seeing phenomenal drift reduction. We're seeing very high coverage that's going to give us the best performance for both products in this tank mix scenario. So when you're making nozzle selection decisions and you're tank mixing in different products, I really encourage you to look at the type nozzles you're using. And there's nozzles out there that are going to give you good performance across a wide range of different chemistries and also a wide range of different environmental scenarios. You know, if you're really solely focused on high coverage, you might run into some scenarios in the field that you want and need that drift reduction that could lead to some issues in your application. Likewise, on the other side, if you're solely heavily focused on drift reduction, you might see issues with coverage. So focusing on trying to select nozzles that are like an all-terrain tire is where I try and focus a lot of my nozzle recommendations, because they're going to do multiple jobs for you. The first nozzle I'm going to recommend is a Pentair Hypro ULD. Now that may not be the best nozzle for any tank mix application scenario. So if you're looking for recommendations for tank mix nozzle selection, I'd recommend downloading the Pentair Hypro Spray It app. It's available on an iPhone or Android. And in there, we have looked at a wide database of different chemistries. I think we have about 1,000 products in that database today, where we have looked at the type chemistry it is, we've looked at the individual label for that product. So if there's any specific restrictions, scenarios, anything you have to follow, we've built that into a chemistry-specific nozzle recommendation for you.